There's a short life in
Why,
the
why do you
acting
think that
world.
is? What the creative side is?
Well, because losing out money, you got to take drugs. You're going through so much shit to try and deal with life.
The Hollywood Lights once called out Terrence Howard. The black star with sorrowful eyes once touched the peak of Oscar glory, once made the whole world bow before hustle and flow and the icy power of empire. But now, everything seems to have changed. No more leading roles, no more applause, only endless lawsuits, heavy tax debts, stormy statements that provoke public outrage. From an icon, Howard has become an outsider in Hollywood. He once declared, "I am ready to disappear," once hinted at being blacklisted from the capital of cinema. And the secrets, the accusations, the confessions continue to be exposed. What turned a one-time icon into today's tragedy? And what bad news still awaits Terrence Howard ahead? The bad news is not just rumor. They are happening relentlessly, each blow striking directly at Terrence Howard's career and life. Since April 2025, from lawsuits to heavy tax rulings, everything has laid bare a cruel reality. Howard is no longer a sought-after star, but someone abandoned on the margins of Hollywood. And here these are the latest, most heartbreaking developments, marking the beginning of the tragic saga called Terrence Howard. From Hollywood Lights to the darkness of oblivion, April 2025. In a conversation with Bill Maher, Terrence Howard, once an Oscar nominee and the soul of the series Empire, suddenly dropped a line that stunned fans. "My goal now is to disappear from Hollywood." The statement rang like a death knell for a career that once burned bright. Not a rumor, not an exaggeration. Howard admitted he was no longer being offered major roles, no longer receiving calls from big studios. And in his words lingered bitterness, the feeling of being blacklisted from the very land that had once lifted him to the peak. That truth did not come overnight. It was the result of a chain of events spanning half a decade, where Howard was both the one who dared to fight back and the victim of the very legal battles he initiated. Back in 2020, Howard filed a lawsuit against 20th Century Fox, by then owned by Disney. He accused the studio of using the image of his character Lucius Lyon in Empire for commercial and promotional purposes without paying royalties. To him, it was blatant exploitation. Howard believed that it was precisely the role of Lucius that helped Empire explode, becoming a television phenomenon with peak viewership of over 17 million for a single episode. But instead of sharing in the well-deserved profits, he claimed he was treated merely as a hired hand. Not stopping there, by late 2023, Howard went on to sue CAA, one of the most powerful agencies in Hollywood. The reason he believed they colluded with Fox to suppress his salary in Empire far below its true value. Howard revealed a figure that shocked the public: $325,000 USD per episode. His fee at the height of the series far lower than that of other stars of the same caliber, and nowhere near reflecting the enormous commercial success the show generated. Howard insisted he lost hundreds of millions, even calculating that he was shortchanged by as much as 300 million USD over the course of Empire. He bitterly said, "If someone took 300 million USD from you, you'd have to stand up and demand it back." And Howard did stand up, but the price was isolation. Major studios gradually steered clear of his name. Directors who once admired him fell silent. In an industry where relationships matter more than talent, Howard had turned himself into someone difficult. And as he admitted, studio roles and major contracts were now nothing but the past. If the lawsuits with Disney and CAA made Howard an outcast in the filmmaking world, tax troubles dragged him into financial ruin. In March 2024, a U.S. federal court declared that Howard must pay nearly $903,000 USD, including unpaid income taxes and penalties, for the period from 2010 to 2019. The irony: Howard didn't even show up to the hearing to defend himself. The result was a default judgment against him, forcing him to accept the ruling. The American press called it a fatal blow to Howard's already shaky career. For an actor once paid millions, a $1 million bill might not have seemed huge, but in the context of dwindling work and being cut off from Hollywood's mainstream, it became a crushing burden. Instead of staying silent, Howard made matters worse with a shocking statement. He claimed he was a descendant of slaves, and therefore he shouldn't have to pay taxes. The argument quickly became a laughingstock in the media and online. People mocked him as talking conspiracy theories, and it only further ruined his image. Howard had announced his retirement in 2022 after completing The Best Man: The Final Chapters. He said he wanted to rest and make way for the younger generation. but the harsh truth, he came back not out of passion, but for money. In an interview, Howard admitted he was forced to take on more films and projects, just to pay legal fees for his lawsuits and taxes. From a star courted by studios, he had become an actor working just to pay off debts. The contrast was devastating. A man who once walked the Oscar stage, who once stood alongside Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man, now had to confess he was blacklisted from Hollywood. A man who once held the chance to earn hundreds of millions now struggled under a tax ruling of less than $1 million, yet still felt crushed. And above all, a man once hailed as one of the most talented black actors of his generation was now met only with skeptical glances from the public. The heartbreaking news was not just a string of headlines. It was a chain of truths exposing a man once celebrated, now cast aside. From massive lawsuits and tax rulings to self-destructive remarks, everything piled up until Terrence Howard was no longer a sought-after star, but a man fighting the very ghosts of his career. When Howard said, "I want to disappear from Hollywood," people understood it was not just a wish, but a cruel reality unfolding. A star, an icon, now stood at a bleak crossroads. And the haunting question resounded: is this the end for Terrence Howard? Or is there still a final glimmer of light waiting ahead? Exposing Hollywood and the shocking statements, Terrence Howard once walked in the glittering lights of Hollywood, but since 2023, he has chosen another path, revealing the darkness behind the spotlight. No longer with blockbuster roles, Howard turned his own life and words into a new stage. And there, every statement he uttered became a bombshell, shaking public opinion and forcing people to ask, was he a brave truth-teller or a man on the road to self-destruction? The first highlight was the plan to launch a podcast he described as a nightmare for the studios, a dream for every actor. TMZ reported in April 2025 that Howard claimed the podcast would expose Disney, Fox, and CAA, the very names that once supported him but which he accused of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from his work. He promised to tell stories of business betrayals and shady deals behind the scenes. No longer vague, he said directly, "I have nothing left to lose." The statement divided opinion. Some saw him as David daring to challenge Goliath in the entertainment world, while others believed it was a reckless move, burning the last bridge tying him to Hollywood. When the public had yet to cool down, Howard set off another explosion. On the Club Random podcast with Bill Maher, he revealed that he was once invited to play Marvin Gaye in a biopic, but he turned it down solely because of a same-sex affection scene. Howard's reasons stunned the world. "If I had to kiss a man, I'd rather cut my lips off." The comment was instantly quoted by People, Yahoo Entertainment, and countless other outlets, sparking a firestorm. The LGBTQ+ community condemned him as discriminatory, while the public called it a backward and offensive statement. On social media, thousands of comments poured in within hours, mocking, "This is Hollywood 2025, not the 1950s. A few defended Howard on the grounds that he had the right to set his boundaries, but most argued that as an actor, he should not turn a personal choice into a prejudiced proclamation. And so instead of being linked with the chance to embody a soul legend, Howard was boxed in by the phrase, "cut my lips." That wasn't all. Howard also made bizarre statements about science. In a conversation with Joe Rogan May 2024, he rejected the Pythagorean theorem, insisted that 1 + 1 = 2, and passionately spoke of ideas about eliminating gravity. He was confident that humanity had misunderstood mathematics for thousands of years, and now he would reinvent physics. Immediately, astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson countered publicly, "What Mr. Howard says has no experimental basis and shows a fundamental misunderstanding of science." The scientific community called it dangerous pseudoscience, warning that a celebrity with Howard's influence could spread confusion to the public. Platforms like Unilad and Hot New Hip Hop covered the story, turning the 1A1A2 claim into a subject of ridicule. On Reddit, rumors even emerged suggesting Howard might have mental health issues, though there was no medical evidence. It was speculation, but enough to cast further doubt on his already fractured image. As if that weren't enough, early in 2025, Howard shocked again when he implied Sean Diddy Combs once propositioned him. Yahoo Entertainment reported that the claim remained unverified and Diddy offered no response. Some viewed it as a bold act of exposing the hidden power dynamics, while others dismissed it as Howard stirring controversy for attention ahead of his podcast. In reality, this was not the first time he unveiled explosive secrets, just as the public was starting to forget his name. and each time Terrence Howard's name once again covered the headlines. These stories, from the Hollywood Exposing podcast to the Cut My Lips remark to the Ones Who Won Tab 2 theory and the Diddy accusation, form a continuous chain of drama. On one hand, they show Howard's defiance. He was unafraid to provoke the most powerful players. On the other, they made his image ever more unstable, public doubt colleagues distancing themselves and audiences growing weary of scandal after scandal. Perhaps Howard has accepted that his acting career is over. When there are no more lights on set, he chooses the blinding light of scandal. When there are no more lines on screen, he turns his real-life statements into scripts. But the tragedy is this: while he believes he is telling the truth, the public sees only a man walking a dangerous line between courage and self-destruction. Will his upcoming podcast truly expose Hollywood? Are his remarks about Marvin Gaye and his science theories signs of instability or mere stunts? And is the accusation against Diddy a courageous confession or just bait for public attention? No one has a definitive answer. But one thing cannot be denied. Terrence Howard, though his acting career has faded, still knows how to make the world watch him, not through artistic brilliance, but through shocking and controversial words. The shocking statements and the plans to expose Hollywood are only the tip of the iceberg. They reveal a Terrence Howard who is reckless, defiant under the public gaze. But if we dig deeper, we see that the roots of this rebellion lie in his private wounds. For before becoming a star, Howard was once a child who witnessed bloody tragedy within his own family. Before fame, he had already endured loss, violence, and broken marriages. Behind today's seemingly outrageous words lies an entire past haunted by trauma. And to understand why Terrence Howard has stepped onto this path of self-destruction, one must return to the painful events that shaped his entire life. Private turmoil and personal pain. If Terrence Howard's career is a film full of ups and downs, then his personal life is a tragedy soaked in tears and blood. Behind the spotlight, behind the roles admired by the world, Howard had to grow up in a haunting reality with wounds that followed him for life. At just 2 years old, Howard witnessed a horrifying scene that many would never forget in a lifetime. December 1971, in a crowded department store in Cleveland, the Howard family stood in line to take a photo with Santa Claus. A small argument broke out over order, and in an instant his father pulled out a knife and stabbed a man to death right in front of his young son. The case was coldly labeled by the press as the Santa line slaying. His father was later convicted of manslaughter and served nearly a year in prison. Little Terrence, too young to fully grasp what had happened, etched into his memory the image of his father's bloody hands, the panicked screams, and the sudden death before his eyes. After his father's release, his parents divorced, and Howard was raised by his great-grandmother. His childhood was marked by a lack of affection, a broken family, and no source of comfort. Worse still, his father continued to be violent, beating him almost daily until the age of 14. Howard once admitted, "I grew up with fear inside my own home." The physical scars faded, but the emotional wounds never healed. The pain did not stop in childhood. Just as his career began to rise, Howard suffered the greatest loss of his life. His mother, Anita Williams, passed away in 2008 from colon cancer. 6 years of battling illness ended in a sorrowful funeral. At 39, Howard collapsed completely. He wrote on his personal blog that his life was split into 2 halves before my mother died and after my mother died. Her passing left a void nothing could fill. He disappeared from the media for a long period, only to return with a more somber face and sadder eyes. Howard admitted that the grief of losing his mother made him more irritable, more prone to losing control, as if trying to fight an emptiness too vast with invisible anger. Howard's love life was another endless storm. He went through 3 official marriages, all of them ending in turmoil. His first wife was Lori McComas, whom he married in 1993. They had 3 children together, but divorced in 2001. Remarkably, they remarried in 2005, only to divorce again 2 years later. The cycle of marriage, divorce earned the press nickname Hollywood's most uncertain love story. In 2010, Howard married Michelle Gent. The marriage quickly turned into a disaster. In 2011, Michelle filed for a restraining order accusing Howard of abuse. They divorced in 2013, and in 2019, the court ordered Howard to pay $1.3 million in spousal support. He angrily declared karma will come, but in the end he complied. His third wife was Mira Pak, whom he married in 2013. They had 2 sons, but in 2015, Mira filed for divorce while pregnant. Ironically, just days after the paperwork was finalized, Howard held his newborn son from the wife he had just separated from. In 2018, they unexpectedly announced their engagement again, but the relationship remains ambiguous, half public, half private. To date, Howard has 5 children and is already a grandfather, yet his married life remains a whirlwind. Alongside failed marriages came a series of violent scandals. In 2001, Howard was arrested for assaulting Lori, his first wife. The case ended with probation, but the image of a hot-tempered star stuck with him ever since. In 2011, Michelle, his second wife, also filed for a restraining order claiming he had threatened her during a vacation. In 2005, he was even arrested for a fight with a man in a restaurant. Repeated incidents created a tarnished legal record that cast a shadow over his artistic career. These tragedies led many to conclude Howard seemed haunted by violence and loss since birth. From witnessing his father kill a man to being beaten by the same father to losing his mother and then repeating cycles of abuse in his marriages, he was both victim and perpetrator. As a result, the public's view of Terrence Howard was no longer intact. People felt compassion for his shocking childhood, but disappointment at his failure to escape the cycle of violence. Howard once said, "I am not good at being a husband." A simple admission, but it encapsulated a lifetime of tragedy. Perhaps the wounds from childhood shaped a life of turmoil where joy was fleeting, but pain remained constant. In real life, Howard resembles a man imprisoned in a room full of darkness-haunted childhood, broken marriages, violent scandals. And yet, strangely, every time he stepped on screen, he shone brilliantly, as if borrowing his roles to make up for personal losses. It is this brutal contrast that created the complexity of Terrence Howard, a wounded man in reality, but a genius before the camera. And to understand why he once reached the peak of fame, we must return to his career journey, where the stage lights temporarily masked the shadows of his life. A glorious career and turning points. Howard first began to attract attention through supporting roles in the 1990s, but it was not until 2005 that he truly broke out. His role as DJ, a pimp dreaming of becoming a rapper, in the film Hustle and Flow, transformed Howard from a little-known name into a cinematic phenomenon. His powerful acting, sorrowful yet explosive eyes, and raw, gritty rap voice touched the hearts of both audiences and critics. The film was not only an artistic success, but also a commercial one, earning Howard an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Hustle and Flow also won the Oscar for Best Original Song, with its Hard Out Here for a Pimp, which Howard himself performed on screen. In that moment, Hollywood saw the birth of a new star. 3 years later, Howard further cemented his place when he appeared in the blockbuster Iron Man 2008, the film that launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Playing Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes, Tony Stark's close friend and military partner, Howard became an integral part of Marvel Studios' beginning. With a reported salary of around $3.5 million USD, he was the highest-paid actor in the film, even more than Robert Downey Jr. at the time. The future seemed wide open. Howard was expected to continue as War Machine, standing alongside Iron Man and other superheroes in a billion-dollar franchise. But that golden opportunity slipped away in a bitter dispute over pay. When Iron Man 2 went into production, Marvel slashed Howard's salary to just $1 million USD, less than a third of what he was supposed to receive. Howard refused, and the role of Rhodey was immediately given to Don Cheadle. Howard later bitterly revealed, "I helped Robert Downey Jr. get the role of Iron Man, but he turned his back on me. They took money from my contract to increase his salary." Though Downey denied it, the truth was that Howard lost his chance to stay connected with one of the biggest franchises of the century. Critics called it the most expensive slip in the career of a black actor. After the Marvel shock, Howard struggled to regain the spotlight. He appeared in various films and TV projects, but it wasn't until Empire 2015 that he was truly reborn. As Lucius Lyon, the ambitious, ruthless, yet deeply conflicted music mogul, Howard took viewers on a journey of awe and obsession. Empire became a cultural phenomenon from its very first season, with some episodes reaching 17 million viewers, a record for modern American television. Howard won the NAACP Image Award for Best Actor, and his name returned to the ranks of Hollywood's A-list. What made Empire special was that the role of Lucius Lyon mirrored Howard's own life, a man of talent and sensitivity, but full of contradictions and shadows. His performance convinced audiences that only Howard could embody Lucius. He once admitted, "Lucius is the dark side of myself." with Empire Howard had a spectacular comeback one that seemed strong enough to erase earlier scandals and failures. But when the series ended after 6 seasons in 2020, Howard suddenly announced he would retire. In 2022, he repeated this intention after completing The Best Man, the final chapters. "I don't want to repeat myself anymore." Beyond Hustle and Flow, Iron Man and Empire, Howard also left his mark in other notable projects. He appeared in Crash 2004, which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2006, in Prisoners 2013 by Denis Villeneuve alongside Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, and in the sci-fi mystery series Wayward Pines 2015. Howard's talent was not confined to acting. In 2008, he released an R&B album titled Shine Through It with 11 songs, written and performed by himself. The album did not achieve major commercial success, but showcased the versatility of an actor always seeking to push beyond boundaries. Looking back, Terrence Howard's career is a symphony of extreme highs and lows. He once reached the Oscars, joined Marvel, and became America's #1 TV star only to lose opportunities and shut the biggest door of his life with his own hands. But whether rising or falling, his name remained tied to impactful works. And that is why, even though his personal life and public remarks have cost him dearly, his artistic legacy still deserves mention in Hollywood history. When the lights go out, what remains for Terrence Howard? Terrence Howard is a living paradox of Hollywood. An actor who once touched the peak of glory, delivering iconic performances, yet at the same time one of the most controversial figures of the past decade. Mention his name and people recall unforgettable film scenes, expressive eyes, and roles filled with inner torment. But just as quickly, the public remembers how he threw himself into whirlwinds of scandal lawsuits and shocking statements. Howard's legacy, therefore, is not only art, but also a cautionary tale about the fleeting nature of fame and the price of stardom. In terms of artistry, Howard cannot be denied. His role as DJ in Hustle and Flow 2005 is still regarded as one of the finest performances in American cinema of the early 21st century. The film earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor and turned its Heart Out Here for a Pimp, the song he performed on screen, into the first rap track ever to win an Oscar. His career is also tied to standout works like Crash 2004, which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2006, Prisoners 2013, one of the decade's finest crime dramas, and Empire 2015-2020, a television series that left a cultural imprint and made him an icon of the small screen. To speak of Howard is to speak of an actor who could make any character come alive, layered and profoundly human. Alongside his acting achievements, Howard expanded his legacy into music. His 2008 album, Shine Through It, though not a commercial hit, showed him to be a multi-talented artist willing to step beyond the safe zone. For many fans, it stood as proof of an unceasing creative spirit, a man unwilling to accept being defined simply as just an actor. Yet Howard's legacy is overshadowed by scandal. He was replaced in Iron Man, a turning point that cost him the chance to become War Machine in Marvel's billion-dollar franchise. He became entangled in lawsuits with Disney, Fox, and CAA, claiming hundreds of millions in lost wages. He faced a near $1 million tax judgment, accusations of domestic violence, and public outrage over his statements. Many lament that instead of being remembered solely as a gifted actor, Howard often became the subject of bad news. But it is precisely this contradiction that makes Howard's legacy unique. For Howard is not just an artist, but also the clearest mirror of Hollywood itself, a place where one can rise overnight and fall with a single decision, where brilliance can be buried under personal scandal. Through both triumph and bitterness, Howard illustrated the price a star pays when living under the spotlight. Today at 56, Howard is rarely seen on screen. Instead, the news is about his Exposing Hollywood podcast, his bizarre remarks, and ongoing lawsuits. Some say his legacy has been ruined, that his name will always be tied to controversy. Others believe what he left on screen will outlast every scandal. For no matter how controversial Howard may be, no one can erase the truth that he once delivered unforgettable cinematic moments. Perhaps that is the fairest view of Terrence Howard. A talented actor yet full of contradictions. A star once radiant yet self-destructive. A man whose legacy is a fusion of art and tragedy. And so whether his next step is to disappear to expose Hollywood, or to shock again with his words, the name Terrence Howard will remain, as a chapter both dazzling and sorrowful in the history of American cinema. Terrence Howard is only one among many stars with tragic fates in Hollywood. Do you want to know who's next? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast.
There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now during on your screen.